What's going on, guys? Today I wanted to discuss a very interesting side deck card for 2014 WCQ Hat format that multiple people have brought up to me and asked what is my opinion on this card in the side deck. Do I think it's more of a gimmick, or do I think it's a game-changing card for this format? And that card that I wanted to discuss is Psychic Shockwave, the card that's on the screen right now. And it's a very, very unique card, and in the past, this has been brought up, and so I've play tested with it a bunch, and I wanted to just give my overall opinion on it and talk about, is this a card you should be siding or a card you should even be looking out for? So let's get straight into this video. So if you've never seen this card before, what it does is you activate it only when your opponent activates a trap card. Then you're able to discard a spell or trap card to special summon one level 6 dark machine type monster from your deck. So on the surface, you would probably be siding this card in going first against one of those trap-heavy decks, such as H.A.T or Geargia, or some of the more rogue options, for example, Battling Boxer that plays lots of traps, or Koikimiru Firefist that plays a handful of traps, and some of those just in general trap-heavy decks. Now, why would this card be a good option? And I think it particularly comes down to what you would be summoning off of this. And so the card next to it that I have is the card that the majority of the time you would be summoning off of that, and that is Jinzo, which obviously almost anyone who's ever played this game knows Jinzo. It's a very classic card, but just to quickly go over that, it says as long as this card remains face up on the field, all trap cards cannot be activated, and the effects of face-up trap cards are also negated. So the idea behind this is you set this, your opponent goes to do their turn. If it's a slow, grindy deck, say Geargia, they set an armor, set some back row, and it's back to your turn. Now, say your opponent goes and activates something like a Bottomless, or something like a Compulse, Torrential, or even stuff along the lines of Breakthrough Skill. What you're able to do is chain the Psychic Shockwave, discard a card, summon the Jinzo, and now Jinzo is on the field before those cards resolve, so they will be negated. So that, on the surface, is very strong, being able to summon a Jinzo, stop all the traps. But now let's get into some of the more detailed sides of this. So, Jinzo as a whole, like I said, very strong card. But the thing with Psychic Shockwave is, in general, you would be siding probably 2 to 3 copies of this to see it as consistently as possible, along with playing, 1 copy of Jinzo if you don't want to brick on it, but also in most cases, Psychic Shockwave is going to be a dead card if you draw into the Jinzo, so some people will even go as far to side 2 copies of Jinzo. So, my problem with this specifically is you're dedicating 5 slots to, being able to pull off this combo, in a sense, to shut down those trap-heavy decks. Now, if it resolves, sure, it's really, really good. But the other thing for Psychic Shockwave, on top of, you have to hope you don't draw your Jinzo, and you have to hope that you see Psychic Shockwave beforehand, is you also have to rely on your opponent activating specifically a trap card, and then on top of that, you have to be able to discard a spell or trap as well, and that is cost. Even though for the older copies it might not look like it, it is considered cost according to OCG rulings and such during this time period. Now, besides all of that, there's more to this card. So, you're taking up all those slots, and Jinzo is powerful, but the thing is, there are so many cards that can stop Jinzo as a whole. For example, in those matchups that I mentioned, if you're playing, say, H.A.T, if your opponent has a set Madolche and an Ignition or a double Cyclone, they can just pop their own Madolche, summon the Madolche, and then pop the Jinzo, and now you basically are down 2 cards, one for the Psychic Shockwave and one for the discard fodder, just to get your card popped. And it kind of puts you even further back into this game. Now, on top of that, there are so many other cards that can just simply out Jinzo. For example, Firehand is another good card that just outs Jinzo. You attack into it, crash, pop it. Now, you have no Jinzo on the field. If they summon Ice Hand, they can, run in, do some more damage, or if you have another monster, they could potentially crash it, pop some of your back row, and it kind of shuts down your whole play. Besides that, a lot of decks are playing cards like Forbidden Chalice that can just negate it. And then, obviously Jinzo would be kind of large there, but if you have other trap cards like those Torrentials or different things, it completely just stops all of, the ability to shut down those traps. So it kind of defeats the purpose. Besides that, cards like Forbidden Lance, while it might not get rid of the Jinzo on its own, it's a way to make it much weaker, and then most monsters, or a lot of monsters in general, can just beat over it, because Jinzo has 2400 attack. You subtract 8 for the Lance, that's going to put the Jinzo at 1600 attack, so something like a Fire Fist Bear with a Tenki can just run over it. Another card is, Book of Moon. Just simply flipping it face down is a way to out the copy of Jinzo. So just that alone makes me think that this card is more of a gimmick in a deck. And the other thing is, where would you exactly place Psychic Shockwave? Obviously, if you're playing a lot of traps yourself, you're not going to want to play these. But obviously, there are places where this could be kind of good. Take a deck like Mermail that doesn't play that many trap cards besides like spheres, maybe some breakthrough skills or something, and they also special summon a lot, so at worst case scenario you could special summon a card and then just tribute summon the Jinzo. In that case, this does seem a little more desirable, especially since they also play spells that you don't mind getting rid of in things like Upstart Goblin or extra copies of Soul Charge. It does seem very powerful, as well as decks like even Spellbook. Spellbook plays mostly spells, sometimes a few traps, and being able to discard some of your Spellbook spells, especially if you don't have High Priestess, can be kind of good for your Spellbook of the Masters and things, so it has a place there as well. Also, a deck like Sylvan, very similar to Mermail in a sense, where it can put up free bodies and then you could just tribute summon it. It's also an okay option. So I definitely think the card is decent, but in general, I think it's definitely more of a gimmicky card than anything. Simply because it takes up so many of your side deck slots, it has the chance to be dead, and there's so many other outs. Especially when we go and look at the cards that those decks would much rather play most of the time. For example, Trap Stun is a very, very powerful card. Being able to just blank all trap cards for the turn, really strong, and those decks that don't play a lot of trap cards don't really care about traps, so why not just play Trap Stun and it'll be live more than not. And then there's cards like Royal Decree, which is a continuous. Obviously this can lose to things like MST and stuff, but if anything, that's wasting the MSTs on something like this. And if you're playing something like Mermail, you'd rather them pop something like this than pop your spheres. Or, if you're playing Sylvan, you'd rather them pop this than your field spell. Or, Miracle Fertilizer, a ton of different things. And even at worst case scenario, things like Wiretap are just going to be live more times than not versus, having to make sure you still have a Jinzo in deck and a discard. So, in general, I think I would much rather only have to side, 3 cards versus 4 to 5 for a potential gimmick. But if you are playing a deck that can special summon a lot in general, there even is an excuse to play Psychic Shockwave or even just side in a copy of Jinzo if you really wanted to. But in general, I think there's better options. But I wanted to kind of make this video just to discuss that and talk about it. I think the card in general is very, very cool. I think there is potential with it. I just can't see myself picking to play Psychic Shockwave over some of those much more powerful card options. But if there's any other cards that you want me to discuss and talk about my opinion on them for the sideboard, definitely let me know in the comments section. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up on it, subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on a new video from me, share this video with your friends, and anyways guys, I will see you in the next video.